He's not even in my league.
You guys are not gonna believe who Jimmy Butler almost tackled on the court during a fight. You've probably heard of the gritty and tough Jimmy Butler, the guard-forward combo that's played for the Miami Heat, the Chicago Bulls, the Minnesota Timberwolves, and the Philadelphia 76ers. However, that grit and toughness that Butler shows on a consistent basis doesn't always translate into happy endings. In fact, Butler has found himself right in the center of quite a few fights. In this video, we've grabbed the most exciting and entertaining fights of Butler's successful career to talk about. They range from normal trash talk,
And if I was their coach, I would never put him on me ever again. He's like, no.
to pushes and shoves, and even to wrestling on the court in the middle of a play. Also, make sure you stick around until the end of the video because we're going to talk about the most recent fight in Butler's career. Our first fight for this video happened to be against LeBron James. The Miami Heat were going against the Chicago Bulls, and it was late in the second quarter during a very close game. A Miami teammate tried to throw LeBron a high pass down court, but Butler was able to rip it away from him once he grabbed it. Now this caused both players to hit the ground, where they stayed for quite a while. James looked like he grabbed the waist of Butler and dragged him down to the ground with him, which kind of started it all. Then Butler accidentally kicked LeBron in the face while he was falling, and the two began shoving and keeping one another on the ground for longer than they probably should have. Eventually, the ref had enough of the wrestling going on back there and gave both of them technical fouls, although they both acted like nothing even happened after that punishment. In fact, they weren't even seen trash talking that much afterwards. Instead, they were just talking to their teammates and neither looked that mad. Unlike in the last fight of this video involving Jimmy Butler and TJ Warren, so stick around until the end of the video to find out what happened there. For now, we'll stick with another fight that almost ended really badly. The Chicago Bulls were locked in a playoff series against the Washington Wizards, and they were down 2-0 in the series. Obviously, in that type of situation, emotions are already going to be high. Now, there were 8 minutes left in the fourth quarter, and Nene had just put up a layup to cut the Bulls' lead to 2 points. As he turned around to run back, he bumped right into Jimmy Butler, who had some choice words for him afterwards. Almost immediately after that, they both headbutted each other and stayed forehead to forehead until Nene swung his right arm and apparently hit Butler in the face to try and get some separation for himself. Once we saw the replay, it turned out Nene didn't actually punch him in the face, but rather grabbed the back of Butler's neck and refused to let go of him, which is exactly why Butler then got furious and started pushing Nene backwards and shoving him the entire way. As people quickly got involved to stop the fight, Nene could be seen holding his right hand up in a fist, looking like he either swung at Butler or was seconds away from doing so. If those teammates and refs weren't there that quickly, Nene could have legitimately thrown a punch, and you can imagine that Butler would have responded with one of his own. However, we don't have to think about all that because it was stopped at a good time. Similar to how this next fight was stopped just before it could have got a lot worse. The Chicago Bulls were in yet another playoff series in this fight, so I guess this just happens to be when Butler lets his emotions get the best of him, though this one wasn't really his fault at all. The team was going against the Boston Celtics, and they were up 2-1 in the series at the time. Boston held a 20-point lead in this game, though, so the Bulls were desperately trying to flip the momentum. Chicago missed a shot, and Marcus Smart came down with the board. As he went to dribble up court, Jimmy Butler was locked into every step he took. He literally didn't get off of Smart, so Marcus tried to turn around, and another Chicago player stole the ball and got a free layup. Right when Smart tried to inbound the ball after that, Butler again followed him, and he got right up into him with his chest. At this point, Marcus had had enough and shoved him backwards and out of his face for a second. Butler came right back at Smart, and the two started jawing and arguing for a little bit. And that's when referees and other teammates stepped in to try and separate them. Gerald Green could be seen giving words of encouragement to Marcus Smart and to try to get his head back into the game. After all, they were still winning by 18 points and held all of the momentum. Meanwhile, Butler was being talked to by the Miami Heat legend Dwayne Wade, who had his arm around Butler's shoulders to try and motivate him. Fast forwarding through Butler's career, this next fight happened when he was a member of the Minnesota Timberwolves. The team was going up against the Utah Jazz and Ricky Rubio when tempers started to flare up with just a few minutes left in the game. Minnesota held a 9-point lead and missed a jump shot, and that's when Butler and Rubio both jumped up for the rebound. Rubio fell to the floor, and it seemed as if Butler had some words to say while he was running back on defense. The cameras moved past them for a while, but both players flew into frame, arguing and face-to-face with one another. Whistles were blown, and they both had to be separated before anything escalated. Although it really only took one teammate from each team to settle each player down, so apparently the whistles were blown before either of them said something that they would have regretted. Once each player cooled down a little bit, Butler started waving his arms in the air and getting the crowd in Minnesota hyped up over the fight. This was going on the entire time that Rubio was having a chat with the refs that blew the whistle. Butler was apparently pretty proud of himself for hyping up the crowd while also getting into the head of his opponent. This is something we've actually grown accustomed to seeing in games involving Jimmy Butler. So who do you guys think Jimmy Butler will fight next? Well, if you thought TJ Warren, then you'd be wrong. Well, not that wrong, as his fight is coming up a little later in the video. This next fight involved Butler and Jared Dudley. Butler was on the Philadelphia 76ers while Dudley was playing for the Brooklyn Nets. Brooklyn held a 6-point lead with 7 minutes remaining in the third quarter during Game 4 of their playoff series. Philly led the series 2-1 at this point and were pushing to go up 3-1. Joel Embiid went up to block a dunk attempted by Jarrett Allen and accidentally knocked him down to the floor, being whistled for a foul shortly afterwards. While Embiid was explaining his case to the referees, Dudley flew in out of nowhere and body-checked Embiid in the back. Now Butler saw this and stood up for his teammate, shoving Dudley in the back himself, and the two ended up getting tied up on the baseline. It got so heated that Ben Simmons went to break it up and ended up tackling Dudley to the ground. By the end of it all, there was just a crowd of bodies surrounding Dudley on the ground, with Butler being one of them. Dudley got out of the pile and kept on yelling at Embiid and Butler while he was being escorted as far away as possible. It was an insane situation all around, but I don't think I'd be trash-talking after being thrown to the ground. While Butler and Dudley were the two players who started this large brawl on the court, it was the other players who finished it. D'Angelo Russell, Simmons, Karis LeVert, Tobias Harris, and JJ Redick were all in on the massive pileup that occurred once Dudley fell onto the ground. And finally, we've made it to the most infamous fight of Jimmy Butler's career so far, the one against TJ Warren, the small forward for the Indiana Pacers. This happened with Butler playing for the Miami Heat. The team was winning by 20 points against the Pacers at this point in the game, and Butler spun around Warren and started driving to the basket when Warren grabbed Butler and pulled him back. He was whistled for a foul, but that didn't seem to matter to Butler, who went right back at Warren, and the two went forehead to forehead. There were a lot of teammates holding both players back and keeping them separated, but the entire time they were getting split up, they were trash-talking. The cameras kept flipping back and forth between Warren and Butler, and they were just continuing to yell back and forth. There was a long break in the action to get everything sorted out after that, but the very next possession, the fight just continued. Butler was sizing up Warren on the three-point line before shoulder-checking Warren backwards on one of his pump fakes. Of course, that led to a quick offensive foul called on Butler, but Warren just followed him back on defense, clapping his hands and yelling at him. The referees didn't like Warren instigating yet another fight, so they actually whistled him for a technical foul and ejected him from the game. The second Butler heard the ejection, he turned around and blew a kiss to Warren on his way out. Once again, it seemed as though the fighting was over, but the trash talk continued after the ball game. Butler called Warren trash and said that he couldn't guard him whatsoever.
Soft. He's soft. He's not even in my fucking league. Like, nowhere near me. Put somebody else on me, because I'm a Taz every time we play. He's trash.
Even nowadays, these two players draw a big crowd when they get on the court together. It doesn't look to me like this rivalry's calming down anytime soon, and that will just make it even more interesting for us as fans. Looking to watch more NBA fights? Well, you're in luck. Click on the video that appears on your screen now to keep watching more fights involving your favorite NBA players. And let us know in the comments below who we should make a video about next.